Which brings us to Johnny Mercer himself, because you arranged a meeting with him. We started doing this some weeks ago.
We did.
Veterans Voice. We spoke to Hilary Meredith Beckham before, who's a solicitor who's working on behalf of the Gulf War veterans who are suffering from Gulf War syndrome. And as a result of those conversations, you were able to secure a meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, this is close to my heart. I was involved back in 1990. I mean, I was on my platoon commander's course, and the word came through, and various individuals, friends of mine, were being tipped off. I was involved with all the training in Germany. But I'd never really got into the details of the Gulf War syndrome, and there is one particular campaign group who got in touch with me. We gave them a voice, we gave them a platform on the show. May I just say also that Hilary is one of a number of lawyers who are defending claims, etc. But yeah, every single soldier that deployed into theatre was given a vaccination. And what we were wanting to know is, what was in those vaccinations, because many soldiers, since they've come back, have all sorts of side effects. Yeah. And sadly, many have lost their lives. So why don't we sort of listen to my introduction and set the scene.
Let's have a look.
Many hundreds of Gulf War veterans have since experienced a vast array of symptoms, from early aging, impotency, strokes, and many other conditions. So we need to find out what exactly was in those vaccinations. Were they approved? And why are so many of these symptoms being felt today by Gulf War veterans? In addition, it's come to light that coalition air forces struck a chemical weapons storage facility belonging to Saddam Hussein, unleashing a sizable cloud of sarin gas into the atmosphere. What we want to find out is, were British forces under that cloud of sarin? And we're here to find out today.
So, you went to the meeting with Johnny Mercer. Hilary was with you.
Indeed.
Hilary's with us, I believe, now as well. Hilary, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. So, Hugh, tell us roughly what happened, and we'll ask Hilary what she thought of it all.
Yeah, so we were very fortunate to be able to get a meeting with the Veterans Minister, and Hilary had really 3 questions that she wanted to put to him, because ultimately, veterans deserve an answer on what has been happening to them, the vaccinations, and the fallout since.
Yes. Because they have been waiting a long time. So, Hilary, what were your 3 questions, first of all, and did you get a suitable answer?
I didn't actually get to put the 3 questions, to be absolutely honest. We discussed around the issues. Obviously, this is a long legacy issue, 30 years on. Many MPs and ministers weren't in office at that time. And the problem that we've got is that it hasn't gone away. There are many who served who are still living with this legacy every day for 30 years and haven't got any answers. We understand from the meeting with Johnny Mercer that there is going to be a meeting of experts behind closed doors next week. Why this has suddenly come about, we don't know, but those findings will be made public. We haven't contributed to them in any way, but we'd be interested to see what they are. But one thing I'm very keen on dispelling is the word syndrome, because there was never a syndrome as such. This was a term that the press put on the incidents as a result of the US calling this Desert Storm syndrome. But I agreed with the Ministry of Defence back in 1993, we would use the word syndrome because it's a catch-all phrase. What we meant is illness from service in the Gulf. Right. And there are a number of issues that contributed to ill health.
Right. Well, we've had a statement given to us from Johnny Mercer who says this: I actively engage with all sides of the veterans community, which of course includes those who served in the Gulf War. I'm always open to hearing new research as it emerges, and I'm hosting a roundtable next week with voices from across the academic landscape to understand more about illnesses suffered by those in the Gulf War conflict. I mean, do you think that there is a medical explanation. Does anybody have one, or is that kind of what you're seeking to find?
I think we have a very good idea of what went wrong. And clearly something did, because more came back ill from this conflict than any other,
right,
including Iraq and Afghanistan. So something went wrong there. We know that a lot of the injections, particularly the anthrax, wasn't licensed when it was given. And troops weren't informed of that, so there's a lack of informed consent. We know that some of the vaccines weren't licensed to be used in the particular way they were. And the MOD took advice on this, and we have that advice, fortunately, which confirms they could be sued in the tort of battery for failing to give informed consent to the troops before they were inoculated. But I think that's only part of the picture. There were lots of other exposures. In particular, the report from Haley that's come out of the US, which, a lot of people are criticising the mythology of that report, but it does state that the weather conditions as the UK knew it at the time was that we had blown up some of Saddam Hussein's chemical waste artillery, basically. Around 4 were blown up, and we thought that the weather pattern had moved in a certain direction. Haley's report has the satellite imagery of the weather report at that time and clearly shows a large yellow dust cloud over the US troops, and we're currently trying to see where the UK troops were in connection with that dust cloud. And that was sarin gas, and alarms were going off. We were told the alarms were faulty. But the questions that have previously been asked in Parliament were, was there mustard gas, and did Saddam Hussein have sufficient weaponry to be able to fire chemical warfare over our position? The answer was yes, he had Scud missiles, but there was no mustard gas.
So the question, so let me just bring Hugh back in here. So the question wasn't asked about sarin.
The wrong questions were asked.
Yeah.
The questions that were asked were indeed answered accurately and correctly by the Ministry of Defence, but the wrong answers, the wrong questions were asked.
Right. And so did you extract a kind of a level of something from the meeting, Hilary, that you can give us as an encouragement for something that might happen in the future?
I think it is unusual 30 years on to suddenly hear of an expert meeting next week. We've had no prior notice of it, and we haven't contributed to it. So they are going to be made public, and we'd be very interested to see them. But of course, if it's the case that the wrong questions were not asked all those years ago, and we did in fact blow up a chemical plant, and we have poisoned our own, that is a blue on blue situation. We have caused our own troops to be ill. And, the Ministry of Defence will not like that.
No, indeed. And it's a strange kind of situation, isn't it, Hugh? Because not everybody was affected in the same way.
No, it wasn't, no. And in fact, one of my work colleagues who was serving with the Coldstream Guards at the time, he was injected and he was tested for 6 years. In fact, for 6 years after he left the armed forces. And indeed was his eldest daughter. Also tested, and he's fine. So there won't necessarily be the same symptoms in all that received it. But one thing I do know for sure is that morning in January, when the British Armed Forces went either over the berm or through the berm, and those who were there will know what I'm talking about, it was pouring with rain. So if British forces were under that cloud, they would have been soaked in it.
Yes. It's a terrifying prospect, really. So what's your next step, Hilary? What do you do now?
We have research going on privately at the moment, and we have medical experts looking at this. We're waiting for their conclusions, and then we'll decide the forward plan and what we intend to do. But we'd also be very interested to see the outcome of this government meeting next week. Yeah. Well, we'll keep tabs on it and see what we can do to find out what's going on. Good to talk to you, Hilary. Thank you very much indeed.